The next panel is titled Economic Empowerment and Entrepreneurship, Building Pathways to Prosperity. In chair one, here to my immediate left, or soon to be my immediate left, please welcome Robert Saucedo, a leader with more than 30 years of experience advancing youth empowerment, economic development, justice, literacy, and financial inclusion. Since 2019, he has served as president and CEO of Community Build. Seated next, thank you so much, Mr. Saucedo. Seated next to Mr. Saucedo, we have Kevin Harbour, a successful entrepreneur with tremendous business acumen. Kevin is the president of BizFed Institute. Thank you so much, Kevin. Next, we are pleased to introduce Elizabeth Livy Williams, who has over 30 years of economic development experience working in Southern California and is the owner of Williams Consulting Group. She also currently works as the director of small business for the office of LA Mayor Karen Bass. We also have Dr. Manuel Pastor. He's the founding director of the Center of Justice, Tolerance, and Community at the University of California, Santa Cruz. Dr. Pastor is now USC's Distinguished Professor of Sociology and American Studies and Ethnicity. This engaging dialogue will be led by Danny Bakewell Jr., the executive director of the Los Angeles Sentinel, which is one of the largest African-American owned and operated newspapers. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for our impactful panel. The floor is yours.
All right. Thank you. How's everybody doing today?
Right.
All right. Well, this economic panel, we got it together. Thank you, Cynthia and the Urban League, for all your hard work and commitment to our community. So we're going to just dive right in, and hopefully we'll talk about some things and give you some information that you can use. So to the panel, how can the county and its partners improve on the economic outlook for Black and Brown communities and create an equitable pathway to wealth? And I'm going to start with you, Robert.
Well, I think it's important that local leaders in county government, city, first really understand the difference between a small business is a micro or microcosm of a bigger macro situation. So if you're in the aviation space or healthcare space, and understanding how to negotiate and articulate that space and how it trickles down into small business, and creating programs that educate better and link those businesses to be part of the bigger picture with some intentionality.
Kevin, same question.
Thank you, Danny. In my opinion, the business community is an ecosystem, and there are a lot of components that make up that ecosystem. And we have to create a platform to bring all these elements to the table and to reach a consensus on a path forward. And by doing that, we're stepping out of our silos and collaborating and combining our resources, specifically around industry sectors that show promise and consistent performance.
All right. Libby?
So speaking from the government side, from a city perspective, I always get frustrated whenever I hear an elected official, no offense, say that I'm going to create so many jobs. That's what I'm going to do. And I always think to myself, that's not true. No one creates jobs who are elected officials. Nobody in government creates jobs. Only entrepreneurs, only small business owners. You are the only ones who actually create jobs. Our job, our role is to get out of your way and to make it as easy as possible for you to be able to do business and operate and to grow so that you can actually offer more jobs to the community. How we go about doing that is what we need to focus on. There are a lot of things that we could do better, but as they both have stated, we have to be able to marshal those resources together to be able to help those who might just have an entrepreneurship hobby and see how we can help nurture that into an actual full-blown business. So that's one of the ways I think that the city and the county can assist small businesses.
All right. Dr. Pastor, same question to you.
So first, let me start by welcoming all the people from UCLA who are... I just want to let you know that while I teach here, both of my children went to UCLA because they knew that that would require their parents to pay full tuition, and they wanted us to suffer. And Also, just to explain why I'm using a mic, it's not because I want to be a lounge singer, although I do. I have a voice condition, some of you know about it. It's called spasmodic dysphonia, spasms around the voice box, makes your voice scratchy. It's a condition that's been made famous by Robert Kennedy Jr. You know how his voice is really scratchy? So if my voice was not treated, I would sound like Robert Kennedy Jr. I would not be as delusional as Robert Kennedy Jr.
All right.
But what I would add to this conversation more substantively is to try to create a bit more urgency around these issues as well. I mean, if you look at the Black and Latino household income relative to white household income, it's lagging by about 30 to 40% in LA County. But if you take the same groups and look at households raising children under the age of 5, the next generation, what you find is that white households raising children under the age of 5 make almost 3 times as much as black households raising children under the age of 5, about 2.5 times what Latino households make. So we are baking inequality in. And much as you've called the political figures out for not understanding where the jobs get created, another part is how our political figures and our business and civic leaders communicate the urgency of making these changes and creating these opportunities now, so that not just Black and Latino folks can thrive, but that all of LA can thrive. Because if we bake inequality in like that, that's shipwrecking prosperity for the entire region.
Thank you. So, Libby, let me ask you this question. The report currently says that over 300,000 black women have kind of withdrawn out of the workforce over the last 3 months. Why is that, and how do we deal with that?
That was because they were fired from the federal government. That's part of what the statistics say, is that a large percentage of those who have been laid off from this administration were black women, black educated women. Might I also add, though, that black women are also the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs in this country as well as Latinas. Right? So we have to look at it as potentially an opportunity, because you've got some excellent skills and some training and education. Perhaps they aren't going to go look for another job. Perhaps they're going to, hang out their shingle and decide to open up their own business. What can we do to help support them in that effort is what we need to be thinking about.
Thank you. So, Dr. Harbour, African Americans currently have the highest unemployment rate of all communities at 10.6%. Latinos, while at 6.5%, are trailing as well. How do we begin to address that unemployment, and how do we, level the playing field?
Thanks, Danny, for that question. As mentioned, my name is Kevin Harbour. I'm the president of the BizFed Institute, and we convene forums on issues that affect the regional economy, one of them being workforce development. And what we found is that there's a lot of information that doesn't reach our community. The fact is that there are industry sectors that we just don't, or I'm not going to say we just don't, we're just not aware of them. When I go into meetings on infrastructure with water resiliency, all the utilities, clean energy, like green hydrogen, you don't see us in the room, right? These are high-paying, thriving career jobs. And, even though that my organization isn't a quote-unquote black organization, because I have a majority Republican board, my job is to make sure that no one gets left behind, certainly my tribe or the Brown tribe. So what I do is I do extensive outreach into our community to get people in the room to understand these opportunities, to introduce them, and we have to magnify that. We have to do more of that. You know, there are a lot of elected officials in this room that have been gracious enough to take that mantra on, and I'm looking at them in the front row and have actually spoke at our events and then taken that messaging back to their districts and to their constituency. And to be candid with you, you know, it takes about $149,000 now, what I understand with the interest rates where they are, to buy a home. Buying a home is, you know, your initial vehicle for building wealth. And so in addition to making people aware, also preparedness, upskilling. There are community-based organizations out there that are positioned in these particular industries that, you know, everybody's worried about AI. You better get on board, right? Because it's already here, it's everywhere. And instead of being scared, get educated, get ready. I got 30 years in IT. I've had to pivot about 4 or 5 times in my 45, I'm just aging myself, 45 years of employment. And, you know, we have to just really understand that, you know, when the tide changes, we have to change. We have to get educated. We got to be prepared because you have to add value to your organization. And when you get educated, you get confident. When you get confident, it comes across in the interview process. And those of us that are already where we are, we got to reach back, pull up, you know, mentor someone and make sure that they understand what's at stake here. Because I'm a baby boomer and I'm terming out in terms of the workforce. Who have we as a group reached back and educate, prepare, and be positioned to pull forward so that we can maintain our communities? You know, I grew up in Leimert Park. We all know what's happening there. Who can afford to buy a house now at $1.2 million at 1,200 square feet, 2 bedrooms in Leimert Park? This is serious. So, you know, we got a workforce development forum tomorrow at UCLA Extension. I sit on their advisory board. I put out the word. And we got folks showing up. We're getting people hired on the spot. There are organizations right now, you know, Brotherhood Crusade, Urban League, you know, you guys are out there doing a phenomenal job. And we have to support you. We have to show up, just like all y'all are here. We have to show up and we have to be ready to throw down, help, and be unapologetic about it.
Thank you. Dr. Pastor, poverty in the Black and brown community has risen over the last several years from 29% to 36%. How do we curb this trend that where we're getting poorer while everyone else is getting richer?
Thank you for a really simple and easy question. I think part of it is understanding that there's a couple of different elements here. We like to think that education is going to make a difference, and it does. It does help people do better in labor markets. But if you look at each and every level of education, lacking a high school degree, having a high school degree, community college, or a BA, Black and Latinos lag whites in each and every one of those categories. Now, for African Americans, most of it is job discrimination. There's still significant discrimination, both in labor markets and in terms of promotion. For Latinos, it's some of that. It's also a lot of uncertainty about legal status, where employers don't necessarily know. What Black and Latino job searchers and job holders share is a lack of network effects. That is, often you're part of a great network of friends who, like you, do not have good jobs. And that does not help you branch and move up. And I think that's part of what Kevin is talking to as well, is that we do need to have an attitude of, instead of, boy, I'm glad that's not me, there, but for the grace of God, go high. And how do we see ourselves in someone who is lagging and try to think about what are the policy mechanisms, what are the personal connections, what are the strategies to make sure that our communities as a whole succeed.
Thank you. Robert Salcido. So I got to make sure I make this statement and ask this question in the right way, that the median income for African Americans has grown from $51,000 a year to $59,000 over the past 24 months. However, we are still far below the other median income of other communities. How do we begin to address that? How do we raise the playing field? We're behind by about 30%, so it's a long way to go.
Yeah. So if some of you may remember in 2018, let me pause for a second.
Sure.
I need to make one correction that I started out wrong. Let me first, as Joe Ruzan taught me to have good manners, acknowledge the Urban League and Cynthia for the work that they've done to put this together. Thank you for having us here. Intentionality is critical for how we move forward and address the income gaps and how we grow. I think that, ask the question again, because there's a key part of your question I want to make sure I address. If you could ask that question one more time.
Sure. So the median income for black families has grown from $51,000 to $59,000. However, even with that growth, we are still far below the median income of other ethnic communities across the board. We're still the lowest. How do we address that, raise that number to be equal to other?
So I don't think we'll get to equal because we started out so far behind. In 2018, the LA County put together a report called Portrait of Los Angeles County. It was the Human Index report. And it specifically called out an investment in African American men. It's the only report to ever do this to date. And we get these reports, but then no one acted upon it. And so there needs to be some duality in the fact that, one, there has to be a commitment and a promise from those in government to follow through on those investments with intentionality. And two, we have to make a commitment as the village to upskill, take advantage of the training opportunities, and really not look so inward, but look outward. You know, and I'll give an example. When we talk about businesses, for example, we've got some billion-dollar opportunities coming our way with the Olympics and all of the sporting events, et cetera. We tend to focus more on the low-hanging fruit opportunities. But there's some big-dollar opportunities. So how do we come together with intentionality as community to say, look, let's merge these two companies together, or I currently do X. If I flex this way, what are the resources to get me to move there governmentally, financially, or otherwise to play in a bigger space? We have got to stop playing in the small spaces. We've got to look bigger, broader, and position our families and businesses. And secondarily, we have to teach our children not to be ashamed of the strides that we've made. So there are a number of people in this room who have, to include you, Danny, who have made huge sacrifices for the next generation. And there's this error in this generation where they say, well, I want to do it on my own. My daughter and I were having this conversation. I said, you know what? I didn't make the sacrifices I made for your education or things I could have done differently or investment of time in the community for you to start all over. You have to build upon what I built. And I think we've got to continue to create that legacy.
Kevin?
I want to embellish on what Robert said. So for income to grow, if you just stay on the job long enough, you're going to get raises 3-5%, right? But at the end of the day, you have to prepare yourself. And I'm going to get back to this. You got to upskill. You got to upskill in the areas and go after jobs. In today's world, STEM jobs. We have to have the parents invest in their kids with enrichment and point them in that direction because we are smart. Don't let anybody tell you we're not smart. We are smart. It's in our DNA. There's no excuse for it. So if we take that mentality, right, and we focus on careers, and not job, but careers that pay a thriving wage in industry sectors that are on the up, whether it be life science, water resiliency, clean energy, broadband technology or technology in general, all these particular industries are soaring. Healthcare, they're soaring. So when we tell our kids, well, what do you want to major in, right? Focus on the areas so that when you come out of college, you're not in debt, right? You're at least, if you are in debt, be in a position to pay it off. You know, I'm going to tell a quick story. I'm a Bruin. My daughter got a full ride to Viterbi, right? And I started loving SC. But then she decided to go to Penn. $300,000 later, you know, she decided to take that biomedical engineering degree to Howard Medical School, right? And so that's what we're talking about. And what is she going to do? She's going to start a practice, and she mentors kids. So a mentoring network, focusing on majors that are going to pay you that thriving wage. And, you know, don't let Prop 209 or DEI hold you back. All of you in here are educated, smart. I'm going to say it again. We got to reach back and coach these kids and make them believe in themselves and give them paths to achieving the kind of education and skills that are going to pay them more.
Danny, if I may, one other point. You know, Kevin raised something important about 209. When Proposition 209 went into effect, it did exactly the opposite of what it was intended to do. In the last 20 years, over $20 billion of contracting has been lost to communities of color. So it did not do what it was intended to do. And that's just the state of California. So when we begin to look at what can we do to build wealth, we have to have these conversations with our electeds to say, look, you've got to go back and fight for us, policy-wise, to say the policy that was enacted actually put us on a path to poverty. It actually took us out of the rooms where we could contract appropriately. And we've got to renegotiate that, or we've got to go back to, since the state constitution says you can't do race-based contracting, you can go back and look at what's not being done, and there's a pathway to race-based contracting if you can show the disparity through a disparity report. We've got to start doing those types of things to make sure and ensure that we and our children have access to those opportunities.
So as I mentioned, my kids went to UCLA. My son turned out to be a musician. My daughter, a social worker. So do not be looking to me for generational advice. But I did want to point out one thing about that data point about the rise in black household income is we also need to be tracking whether or not that's happening because of young families moving away who can no longer be here. Interesting demographic tidbit. Of the 100 largest metro areas in the United States, the only metro area in the last 15 years to see the number of Hispanic children fall is Los Angeles, which people don't expect. But it's because the high cost of housing is pushing people into the Inland Empire, into the Central Valley, etc. So we really need to be careful about our statistics to really consider how many people are just being pushed out by high housing costs, unaffordability, and address that so that there really is success for people who are homegrown.
Thank you. So let's take a step back and go back 7 months. We all have been know how Southern California was devastated by the wildfires, and in particular Altadena, which is a larger African-American community. So Altadena, we've all worked on different projects in Altadena over the past 7-8 months. How do we begin to put together a prescription to help Altadena recover? It's still behind, it's behind schedule. It's behind in its efforts and its energy to get there, but we continue to hope, we continue to move forward. So how do we do that? So I'm gonna start with Dr. Pastor, and we're just gonna go straight down the line. I'm gonna let everybody get an opportunity to make this answer. Baby, I know you're a LA girl, so you can tell us how to fix the Palisade. Okay. We'll work on that.
So I live in Pasadena, but we own a rental property in North Pasadena, right bordering Altadena. It was where my daughter was living. And the morning of the fire she'd evacuated, she sent me a ring picture of a fire just down the street. And I was like, wow, we're about to lose this property. Just then, that's a 2-unit property. The front tenant arrived. His wife had told him, I know there's a fire, but it's trash day. You should put the trash cans out. So he went and noticed the fire. His name is Luis. He and his father-in-law, Arturo, who 3 hours earlier had lost his home, rushed into the backyard. Our backyard was on fire. Eventually, carport, fences, 3 cars burned up. But they rushed back there with the neighbors who broke through to pour water on the fire and hold it back, while just up the street, about 3 or 4 houses, the firefighters were making their last stand as the fire was kind of coming into Pasadena. I eventually joined the firefight as well. At one point, a firefighter walked by me, and I said, we could use some help here. And he said, looks like you have it together. Keep going, brother. What I took from that experience, though, because he was doing the right thing, he was fighting the big fire, is that when there's a fire, sometimes we need to rush to it. Have some courage. Second, it's better if we go there with our friends and neighbors. And third, it's much better if the government isn't trying to fan the flames, but is actually trying to put out the fire. And I think the circumstance we face is a federal government that's trying to fan the flames. And we are not going to need to pull together like those neighbors to recognize the importance of Altadena historically to the Black community in terms of asset building. It's also been really important to the Latino community as a place to be able to buy as well. And we are going to have to make sure that people get full insurance coverage. And there's a lot of issues, as I think our other folks can talk around, title. Because people, particularly Black homeowners, they just passed it down to their kids without actually officially re-registering it. And in order for the rebuilding to take place, there's a lot of paperwork, a lot of black taxes that are going to have to be paid for people to get through. And we need a lot of assistance, or we're going to lose something that has been incredibly important as a symbol of Black ownership and as a Latino entry point.
Thank you. Kevin?
You forgot LA.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I was going to do Palisades next, but you can go.
No. I will say this, because that is one of my roles at the city, is to work with the small businesses within Palisades who have been affected. And people always think automatically that they don't need any help. They got that. It's already a wealthy community. But you also have to think about the fact that those small businesses, the majority of them, did not own the property that they were leasing. They were small business owners and operators like anybody else. And so their struggles are real because many of them were either underinsured or had no insurance, because you really don't think about that level of insurance that you're going to need in order to rebuild. So not to compare what they might be going through as compared to Altadena, but I also want to make sure people understand that LA is LA, Altadena is Altadena. People sometimes think that we control or over Altadena, but as working with them, they are experiencing the same hardships, the same difficulties, the same challenges with rebuilding their business and trying to figure out where they go from here. Some of them have decided, you know what, it's not worth it. I don't have it in me to take this and start a business again. I'm just going to go ahead and get a job. That's what some have chosen to do. Others have gone ahead and they've relocated elsewhere, and others are just still trying to figure it out. So, but we're here trying to help support them the entire way.
Kevin.
Okay, yeah. So for me, the way I think, I think critically on this, and I look at the root cause of this problem, how it started in the first place. We got to hold public agencies accountable for hardening the infrastructure, right? I'm not going to call out any names. You guys know who they are. Secondly, we got to improve how we fight fires, because it wasn't Mayor Bass's fault. A water hydrant was designed to only put out maybe maximum of 2 houses on a street. There were about 20. So how are you going to point a finger at anybody on that other than to plan proactively on it? Secondly, you got two people right here in the front row and one back here that are putting together forums. Councilmember Hutt, that's what she does, right? She talks it, but she walks it. I've been there. Cynthia Mitchell-Hurd, here we are, right? We're discussing this, and we're arming all of you to go back and take this information and make it an actionable item. You got Anthony Samad here, Mervyn Dimely Institute. He talks it, but he invested in something that I did. He came up to downtown and talked about transportation goods movement. The whole idea is to get out of our silos. That's how you deal with this stuff. And for us to communicate and share information, ideas, and resources. Danny, you came, and headed up a breakout session where the contractors in your breakout session that you led the discussion on, they talked about, well, okay, well, how'd you deal with planning? Well, this is what I did. Oh, really? Can you give me that phone number? Right? And then it was spread across the room. And then we put out key takeaways. Not everybody has that information. That's how it happens. The planners, right? The permit pulling. It takes forever. You know, and when you add all that, you know, with CEQA, environmental impact reports, I can add 20% to your bottom line, which makes it cost prohibitive to rebuild. And if you're 50, 60, 70 years old, you might not want to spend 3 years waiting for your house to be rebuilt. How do we fix that? Their ideas are out there. I'm not going to share, go into that. But the point is that by being in these rooms, all of you out here to be commended. This is how it starts. And I'll leave it there because I could talk another 20 minutes on that.
All right. Robert, I'm stay on the same subject, but I want to ask you a different kind of question. But at the same time, I want to acknowledge State Controller Betty Yee. I see her out there, so I want to just say hello. For all of the resources that the state of California has kind of shipped out for fire recovery and efforts, Betty has been at the forefront, so we want to thank you for all that you have done to continue to do that. But when we talk about that, and this leads to the conversation with you, Robert, is that there's been millions, if not billions of dollars that have been raised and are beginning to funnel to CBOs, community organizations for the recovery effort. But unfortunately, we've talked about this before, Cynthia and I have talked about this, African-American organizations and institutions have been kind of put in a place of kind of a stepchild. We're not in charge of our own funding for our own recovery. We have to go and be second generation behind other CBOs. How do we begin to grow our community-based organizations and say to the state, don't give the money to this organization who then gives us half the money or a piece of the money. Let us control our own destiny, our own recovery. Fund us directly, and let us fund who needs to be.
Yeah. Thank you, Danny. That's a very important question and conversation. When we started our wildfire efforts, one of the things we did is we made a commitment that we would not go to government. One, it's too slow. Two, it comes with other ties. So we went to some of our corporate partners and we formed the Greater Los Angeles Public Assistance Network. But our goal in mind was to focus on recovery. And in doing so, to use those dollars to build the story of why the bigger dollars need to invest in us. So our first quarter report, we took $450,000 worth of donations and force multiplied it to $4.5 million worth of recovery efforts. And that's a story that we can tell and we put into print. I believe that when we consider how the community is viewed, look at Altadena, one of the few places, if not the only place at the time of its beginnings, that African Americans could purchase real estate to live and build community. But there's this error out there, and I remember I was at Cal State LA on a forum, and the moderator started out by saying, how do we build model communities? And I sat up in my chair, I said, let me stop you for a minute. Let's not use the term model community as the new word for gentrification. Altadena was a model community and still is, first and foremost. Secondly, we have to raise the voices of our community, urban leagues, Brotherhood Crusade, Community Build, and come together and say, and demand, not ask, not request, not be mousy about it, but demand with intentionality that those dollars move to our community. Because guess what? There is a direct impact on wealth in South Los Angeles from those black and brown families that lost their homes in Altadena, because our families live there. And that was part of the network and the giving process of our wealth creation. So we have to demand it. We have to stand up and we have to go to our partners, the banks and otherwise, and begin to say, I was just having a conversation earlier about some of the mergers, right? What is your public benefit statement? And how are you going to utilize those dollars as you merge and integrate them into communities that need it? The state of California has something called COIN, the California Organized Investment Network. I see Steve Bradford out there who's running for the insurance commissioner. And I was having a conversation saying we need to use those dollars, over $19 billion of money invested mostly in Northern California, shift the use of COIN to be utilized as an asset opportunity development in fire burn areas in Southern California. That's how we do it. We've got to understand, remember I talked about the macro picture? What's in the macro picture, then what's in its orbit? And we have to fly around in that orbit and begin to grab these pieces. And it requires us, it requires academia, it requires CBOs like ours, it requires business to come together and sit at the table and say, let's fix this, let's do this differently. And so lastly, I'll share a story with you. We were just having a conversation with a local bank who's just come into Los Angeles. And they asked this question, or began to share about all the great things they could do. And I think it was Anthony Samad who asked the question, what's different about you? You remember that? And they tap danced a bit. And so we're going to follow up on that by saying, let's pull together some key leaders in a room in December, and let's answer the question. And the real answer is, what do you need? We need you to diversify your portfolio so that you can make the right investments into community, so that you can create products for nonprofits so that they actually have a financial product that gets them through contract periods when they're waiting for money without high cost of capital. And we need to do this for community. That's the way we approach this, but we have somehow been lulled to sleep and comfort, and we stopped raising our voices in the way that we used to. And I would challenge everyone in this room to, if you haven't been to Altadena, go to Altadena and have an experience of what has happened there, number one. Number two, make a commitment to adopt a family, be intentional about it, and get engaged. And if you've got to put some money on the table personally, all right, we don't need to rely on government right away. We got enough money in this room to do something for someone. And that's what we've got to be committed to.
Absolutely.
I want to add one thing to this conversation, which I think will connect us to the next panel, too. If you look at frontline construction workers in the county of LA, somewhere between 1/3 and 40% of that frontline construction workforce is undocumented. If you think we're rebuilding from the fires in either Altadena or in the Palisades in the context of these raids and this terror, you've got another thing coming. These issues are actually deeply connected, as our communities are. For example, if you look at sort of what the census calls Puma's big neighborhoods in Los Angeles County, the top 5 in terms of Latino adults who are undocumented, 2 of them are probably what you would think: East LA, Pico Union. But the other 3 are in South Los Angeles. And when those people feel frozen out, scared to go to work, they're not earning, that hurts black and brown businesses in the South LA economy. Our fates are interconnected, and these raids are not just threatening immigrants, they are threatening the entire economy of Southern California.
Danny, can I say something about...
Absolutely.
One of the things we haven't talked about is this attack on anything that is considered diversity, equity, or inclusion by this administration. And one of the things that we've seen, and it is anything that is focused on race or gender, is being attacked and slashed. And specifically those programs that traditionally will support entrepreneurs of color. For example, this administration is defunding the women's business centers. They have defunded the Minority Business Development Agency. They are looking to defund the SCORE program, Service Corps Retired Executives. They are looking to defund the Veteran Outreach Business Program. Even veterans are under attack in their programs. And just last Friday, they decided that they are going to lay off everybody that is part of the Community Development Financial Institution Fund, CDFIs. So that CDFIs will no longer exist. CDFI funding, for those who don't know, are not traditional banks. It's where you go when you're not able to get a traditional bank. It's where you go to start out, to get a microloan or a small business loan. It's also very effective in both urban as well as rural communities. So why he would want to even hurt his own base makes zero sense. But all of these programs that we have traditionally used to be a tool or a resource to assist our communities are under attack. And most recently, the Department of Transportation has decided that disadvantaged business enterprise, DBEs, are illegal because they are race conscious. What does that mean? That means that they no longer can have goals within their transportation or within aviation contracts that are focused on a certain percentage of their contracts go to a disadvantaged business enterprise, or even the airport, what was it? Thank you, concessions. I always want to say commissary. Thank you. Airport concessions, disadvantaged business enterprise. That's how many of those businesses that are of color are even in LAX, is because of these programs that they are now telling us are illegal. What we've got to do is we have to understand we live in the state of California, and we know that we embrace and we cherish our diversity here. And we've got to start our own programs because we can no longer rely upon the federal government. There are ways that we can do that. Just because they don't have CDFIs doesn't mean that those programs still can't do lending. They still have to be certified by the state of California. And one of the things we've seen is a lot of the banks that have always been supportive of us or have had DEI in their programs or focus on particular groups, you'll see that they're quietly removing that from their websites. They're quietly removing that they've got programs that are specifically targeting African Americans or Latinos. Not all of them, but many have. And as I've spoken with them, what they're saying is we're being cautious. We're still going to have that same commitment. We know what it means. We're part of this community. But we also don't want to have a target on our back because we don't know what we can deal with this man. We don't know what they'll do. So we'd rather operate this in a way that instead of calling it minority business or women-owned business, we're going to focus on micro businesses because oftentimes that's what our businesses are. So the vernacular might change, but the commitment is still there. And I want to believe in that. But again, we do need to also start our own. An example is the Black Cooperative Impact Fund. That's been around for a while. And the focus is to give 0% loans to small micro businesses that are looking to have an impact on the Black economy. Now, we know because of that case that was down in Atlanta, those sisters who was trying to just focus on venture capital, just on women, Black-owned businesses, the federal government put a stop to that. So we can't have anything that's just specifically targeted towards us, or you're going to have a white man that sues and says it's discriminating against me. That's exactly what happened, right? But you still can't have a fund that is focused on that community without being exclusionary. That's the route we're going to have to go. Just as Robert was saying, we have to put our own money in. We have to be our own resource so that we can help support the development of our entrepreneurs and small businesses.
Thank you. Let me, because we're going to run out of time, so I want to put this question, I want to keep it real, and I want to give everybody an opportunity to respond to this question. Is a lot of conversation about generational wealth. That's kind of the new thing. But when we talk about the Black and even the Black and the brown community, what is the greatest threat to the Black and brown community? The lack of generational wealth or the systemic system of generational poverty? Which one is a greater risk of the African American community? So I'll start with Robert and we'll just work our way down. Yeah, I like that one.
I would say yes to both. And when we consider the reversal of Black wealth that we see happening before our very eyes, all of the things that were put in place, if we think about the last 20, 30 years, just to try to get us to even, and we've not gotten there, and to reverse those things puts us further back. So I would say systemic issues that we see happening today, and then, again, going back, and are we really educated ourselves? Have we educated our families to understand the importance of holding onto that dollar and stretching it internally and take responsibility and accountability for our own wealth creation, because we know systemically we can't count on that.
All right, so we have a lot of conversation. Kevin, I'm moving to you. We have a lot of conversation about self-sustainability. But when we talk about self-sustainability, again, what is our biggest challenge? Is it maintaining generational wealth for those who have it? Or is it those who don't in the generational poverty that our community is constantly fighting against? that's our biggest challenge.
So, Danny, those that have it usually came about it through being educated in their households, in school, in the workplace. I believe that in terms of us elevating ourselves as a whole, we have to take a holistic approach, and we have to reach out to everybody. It can't be exclusive. It has to be inclusive. Case in point, and a lot of us in the baby boomer generation, we were told education is the key, and it worked out, right? But we have a wholesale attack on everything that was gained in the civil rights movement and even before. It is a wholesale attack that's unapologetic, and we have to be unapologetic on how we resist and put together a comprehensive strategy to lessen the impact and turn this around. Case in point, I told you I was a Bruin. I'm also past president of UCLA Block alumni. What they've done with the $1 billion fine against UCLA is they've taken away all scholarship money from that we were awarding to black students to give them a head start so that they can come out of college, get the job, and build a house, right? They no longer 3-to-1 matching funds, right? The university, and there's a list of words that if you apply to anything that has that word on that list, they're turning it down, right? Now, there are some within the university, right, that agree with this. And then there are those of us who don't agree, right? So you got to be smart, but at the end of the day, again, I'm going to say kudos to Cynthia, Keith Drake, and the Urban League team for bringing everybody here together, because when you go back into your world, you got to take this knowledge back, go on Google. You don't need the encyclopedia to figure this out, and figure out your path and way that you can make an impact. Then we come back together and maybe have breakout sessions and share these stories on how we can be successful. Because we can't sit back. If we sit back, we're done.
Elizabeth?
I'm going to agree with Robert and say both. But one of the things I think we also need to acknowledge is that this generation views how they get wealth or what they choose to consider a good job is different than what we have traditionally had. You have to look at how many of these young people are now influencers, or they are selling on TikTok. And these young people are making 6 figures right now. No education, no formal education, should I say, not going to a 4-year institution. So they're seeing the opportunities in terms of being an entrepreneur and how they create wealth very differently than what we have traditionally been taught. I think that's one of the things that we have to embrace and help nurture, but also help them understand how are you going to invest that money that you're making so that you can continue and maintain and have that generational wealth. So many of my generation, once their parents pass on and they've got the house that's in Lamert, Ladera, or elsewhere, they're selling it instead of understanding the value of that property. So how do we make sure that this younger generation who is building their wealth understand how they can continue that and make it intergenerational? So that's my different spin from these two brothers here. I want to make sure we get the gamut.
Totally valid, though.
Right.
.com proved that.
Yes.
Dr. Pastor?
So now for something completely different. I think my colleagues have answered the question of what the challenges are. I want to focus a bit on what the solution is. And I think it's in that title, Solidarity in Action, which is how do we develop solidarity with one another to overcome these systems that are keeping people behind. And in doing that, to think about solidarity in a very honest and open fashion. What do we in the Latino community need to do to challenge anti-blackness that raised its head several years ago with the 4 Latino civic leaders, but always exists and needs to be challenged on a daily basis? What in the black community needs to be done to challenge xenophobia? A xenophobia that's sometimes so deep that folks don't realize 1/5 of black Angelenos are either immigrants themselves or the sons and daughters of immigrants. There's a lot more Issa Raes and Nipsey Hussles than you think. So how do we actually engage in deep conversation with one another to explore differences. For the African American population, unemployment is crucial. For Latinos, it's low wages. It's really not a lack of jobs as much. The unemployment rates might be a little bit higher. So how do we have a data-driven, honest conversation? Because solidarity is not about rah. We're all on the same team. Solidarity is about challenging the difficult moments to find unity and challenging our own tribes to rise to higher purpose and common ground.
Love it.
All right, we have time for one more question before we go to audience questions. So the report, the most recent report says that African American homes have the highest level of no home computer, or no internet connection of any community. So how do we do that? A lot of conversation about IT jobs and AI and things like that, but how do we address the basic, no computer, no internet? Kevin?
Yeah, there's a solution already out there. When COVID hit in 2020, 20% of LAUSD students fell behind a year because of no broadband access, because of no device, because parents were sent home for remote work, kids were sent home for online learning. Zoom would fail because there wasn't enough bandwidth, right? So LAEDC has this program, this group, the Regional Broadband Consortia, called the LA Digital Equity Action League. And their whole initiative is to deal with this problem called the digital divide. You know, my background, having worked for Verizon for 7 years and dealt with engineers, I was involved in the conversations with LA ISD and Selwyn Hollins when we went after this. And so when they would give excuses, I was able to challenge those excuses, right? But there are a lot of us out there that have that same ability. At the end of the day, you cannot run away from the fact that you have to be digitally literate, that has to be as important as buying shoes or whatever, because that's your window to the world. And so when you plan your budgets out and you tell a neighbor, tell a friend, same in schools, you got to force that issue. Because at the end of the day, your kids won't be able to compete. You're not going to be able to compete. It's an issue that cannot be, it still exists, but it has been improved, but it's still, you know, needed, there's still attention needed to this.
All right, thank you. All right, we're going to switch to Melissa, who has a question from the community.
Yes, thank you. We've got your attention here. I've got two young gentlemen with me, Adonis and Nkosi, come up. Adonis is with Dorsey High, and Nkosi is a student with West Torrance High School, 15 years old, by the way. What's your question, Adonis?
First off, sorry if I stutter. I'm a little nervous.
It's okay.
But my question for the stadium is, or the stage, is with the rapid innovation of AI in the workplace, and you know, I'm sorry, I'm really nervous.
All right, take your time.
All right. You all right?
With the rapid innovation of AI in the workplace and constant deconstructing and reconstructing of our economy, how would you suggest that entrepreneurs, specifically those who fall under intersectionalities, to build themselves and profit in America today?
Robert?
Hey, I'm sorry, what's the young man's name again?
What's your name again?
Adonis.
Adonis? Adonis, thank you for that incredible question, and we hope that you do take advantage of this moment in time as you think about this. Let me give an example of the use of AI. Recently, one of our grant writers came to me and said, hey, there's this 5th round of funding for a particular pursuit we were looking at, and I think we should apply for this. And I said, that's more of the same. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to go on AI. I'm going to give you 2 tools to look at. And I want you to run that grant through this AI tool, and there's enough data out there on who responded, what did they respond to, and what are the gaps. Well, then the report that came back told us there were 12 gaps in that funding as a result of AI. So let me see the gaps. I looked at the gaps. I said, we're going to apply for these 3 things because nobody else is doing it. Now we're in the 2nd round of it. So you've got to understand what AI can do for you and help you think better and begin to build parameters around how am I going to build my business better. If I'm a restaurateur, at what point do I look at merging? I think it was Harvard University that came out with several years ago that a business every 5 years should acquire or expand their business into another revenue stream. So what's in my orbit, and then how do I utilize AI and embrace it, right? So you have to, just like when we all got married, we embraced our wives or husbands. You got to embrace AI in such a way that it's like air in your business. If you do not do that, I promise you, you will be out of business quickly.
And Kosi, we've got a question. You've got a question as well for our panelists.
So I wanted to ask, because I have a cleaning business called Cafe Lake Cleaning, and I'm 15 years old. So I wanted to ask for students like myself or other students with promising businesses, I wanted to ask kind of how could they raise startup capital for their business in 2025 or potentially get funded?
I say the first thing you do is put together, get a mentor, someone that you trust, and put together a business plan, right? You define, first of all, you have an overview of what your business is, right? You define the services you provide. You price those services based on industry standards, and then if you do extra stuff, you elevate those price points, right? And this is a cool thing. You don't have to have a brick and mortar business. You can leverage digital assets to advertise your business, okay? Then you get the word out. You get reliable people that will do the job and that will elevate your brand. If you do that, then you go ahead and publicize, get people that you do business with, that first, second, third customer, you put those testimonies on your website. There are enough people in this room that don't like to clean their house. I'm one of them. You do that, I'll give you a call.
The incredible answers. You guys stay put. We've got time for maybe one more answer from some of our panelists.
I think, yeah.
Well, I was just going to say that I think the first step is to stand up at a State of Black LA meeting and ask that question, because now everybody knows who you are.
That's it.
There's a lot of business in this room for you.
I think there's you're setting up a network. Folks are understanding there's a damn smart young man there with a business. And Adonis, you were so brave to ask that question. Before, when we were prepping, we were saying, gosh, we hope somebody asks us about AI, because that's absolutely the crucial issue that's facing folks. So let's give these two young men a big round of applause.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Adonis and Nkosi. I'm so proud of them. I'm so proud of them. This is our future, and they are already thriving. Thank you so much, gentlemen. All the success in your future. You guys hang tight, because coming up, once we take a short little break, we've got Mayor Karen Bass on the other side of our break, about 5 minutes.